I would argue that Bitcoin is another order of magnitude leap in that direction. It's progress, right? So to say we're in a democracy now, and then yes, it's improved things in the world. I can't disagree with that. But I ultimately I don't think we should just be satisfied with our progress. Say, we're done here, democracy, it's all done.
No, but this is the point. Whenever I get into these discussions, I don't want to burn it down. I want to strengthen and improve democracy. When it's weak or when it's fraying, I want to have the debate about how do we make democracy stronger and better.
I think an actual anarcho-capitalistic free market is the ultimate democracy, because you're actually voting with your dollar, buying and selling what to create. And in this hypothetical world, admittedly, where property cannot be violated against, wealth creation would be maximized. So we've limited scarcity. We've limited the things to fight over. And if property can't be violated, like this is the great hope of Bitcoin, you can't take my shit. So why be violent? There's no carrot to the act of violence or coercion. So people,
but that itself is not exactly true, because even Jameson Lopp has a GitHub that lists all the people who have had their Bitcoin violated.
Oh, you absolutely can.
So you can.
But if you hold it properly, as I know you hold yours properly, it's a pretty low attack surface, right?
Of course, but it doesn't get rid of it.
I'm not. By the way,
but even with that, that's the only one form of property. We don't live with a single form of property that is Bitcoin. So let's talk about what property I have. I have Bitcoin. I have my house. I have my car. I have my clothes. I have the property within my house. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you come to my house. You can't get my Bitcoin because I'm super smart and my keys are globally distributed. You can hold a gun to my head and make threats for other things. You can take my TV. You can take my car. So it doesn't eliminate violence. It just eliminates what people can steal from. It just changes what people can steal from you.
And I don't think we eliminate violence. So let me be clear.
And sorry. Let me add to that. Also, we know in every single society, when people are desperate, when people are hungry, they will resort to violence, right? This is why there's the big fear of food scarcity right now.
Right.
Because we are going to see revolutions. We're going to see protests. When people are desperate, they will attack. The great thing about Western liberal democracies, if we build a society that looks after the weakest, it looks after the poorest, like we do our best to try and protect them. I'm not saying this worked perfectly, but we do our best. In the UK, there are people who live in relative poverty, but people don't die of starvation in the UK. And even if the welfare doesn't support them, we have the voluntary organization of food banks that do support people. Now, my travel around the world, I've been to places that has real food scarcity and doesn't have a societal structure that protects the poorest. And they are violent places. Venezuela is a violent place. People will kill you because they're desperate and they're hungry. If we go to pure property rights, we will have people who have not been able to get on the economic ladder, but they don't have a support structure, and they will enact violence upon people and they will kill people. Because Bitcoin is not the only property. So there is other shit you can steal. So you can steal a TV to sell to get some Bitcoin to feed your family. So it doesn't get rid of that.
No, I agree. I want to be clear that people get real hung up on this, and it's like it's black or white. Does Bitcoin end war or does war continue? It's like, it's not about that. Does it reduce the incentives overall to violence, therefore limiting the scope, duration, and severity of violence in the world? That I would argue very strongly in favor of.
Perhaps.
Well, again, if we're talking about government's purpose being property, so we're outsourcing the defense of our property to the government. That's all we're doing, actually. We just currently don't have much leverage at the negotiating table in dealing with the pricing of that security. I think Bitcoin gives us a much more cost-effective and high-integrity assurance of our property rights than government ever can. So the only thing, so it's not absolute, I want to say. The one thing I am absolute on, where you could attack me, is that freedom maximalism. I'm an absolutist on freedom. I think even freedom itself, the concept is self-regulating. The should is everyone should seek to maximize their own freedom, their own purchasing power, their own optionality, but they should do that within the bounds of other people's private property rights.
Right.
I think that creates not only the best individual outcomes, but also the best collective outcome. And by collective, I mean aggregate wealth creation for the world, which means the least amount of scarcity, least amount of things to fight over, and the smallest carrot for fighting over anything in the first place if you can't take my stuff. Now, I understand your argument. Bitcoin is not physical reality. It does not secure your property rights in tables and chairs and cars and whatnot. But the fact that you have an option and recourse to a form of wealth that should you be coming into coercive circumstances, you can at least move your wealth into something like Bitcoin and be very mobile. That gives individuals a lot of optionality to reconfigure themselves in a way that protects themselves from violence.
And I agree. I mean, we've seen those case studies of people who have fled Ukraine with their Bitcoin, and that's been their escape valve. As I said at the start, I'm always trying to look at the implications in the journey. I completely agree with you. Bitcoin changes the logic of violence. First interview we ever did, I think we discussed that.
I did too, yeah.
But I also want to know what is the net impact on the society we live in? And I know we've discussed what is society, but let's just imagine a Bitcoin society in the UK. It's easy to do because we're an island, a little tiny island. And it's a breakdown of the state. They can't take anything, so we don't have a state. Yes, we've changed the logic of violence, but what has the net impact of society been? Have we moved to something which is safer or more dangerous? Have we moved to something like without structure has become more chaotic and disorganized? Have we created a different form of wealth disparity between the haves and the haves not? Have we created dangerous, have we ghettoized large parts of the country? I try and think of the net impact. I don't see it through rose-tinted glasses. And I sometimes feel like it's a bit like SimCity. When you play SimCity, you can design the perfect world because you lay the roads where you want them, put the buildings where you want them. I think it's very easy for anyone to look at the society and look at where we are now and break down all the ills and the problems. But you can't, words, all you can do with words is create a utopia. You don't know the reality of what's going to happen. And it might fucking suck. It might be like Venezuela, and it might be like Bitcoiners in their citadels with a bunch of dudes with guns patrolling and protecting them. And then outside of that, it's a bunch of poor people fighting and murdering and killing each other. And basically, it might just end up being like a total shithole.
Well, look, and to answer your question, it's like on what time horizon? If it's over 2 decades, I would completely agree. Things could get very messy. This is why I always talk about the sovereign individual. It's like these transformations from one age into another, they're not fucking clean and beautiful and you just like shift into a utopia. Typically, there's a destruction, right? There's an implosion of the existing structure. Chaos ensues because for whatever, even in a pure tyrannical society, there's a lot of stability inside of that hierarchy, right? There's predictability, you know what this guy does and what uniform this guy is wearing, like you can kind of get on in the world. But when all that falls apart, when say the Soviet Union collapses, like people are lost, right? They're doing the 40 years in the proverbial desert. We could be going into something like that. But to blame that on Bitcoin, I think is short-sighted.
I'm not blaming it on Bitcoin.
I'm not saying you are, but I'm saying I think that narrative will be pushed. Like, should we actually get into the situation where states, their insolvency is being realized, let's say? They've been able to kick the can on insolvency through inflation, through taxation, all of these methods. Bitcoin becomes like this forcing function of honesty on all businesses, all individuals. The state's the most insolvent, upside down business in the world. So to see it start to crack up in the emergence of Bitcoin, I think people will assign blame onto Bitcoin, somewhat rightfully so, right? It's like, yeah, you gave people an alternative to a stronger, more cost-effective property right. It's bankrupting the existing business of property rights. And in that transformation, yeah, things are going to get messy, potentially. Like, no one knows, by the way. So I'm not saying what I have to say about it as gospel. And indeed, what I said to you earlier, it's like I'm disheartened. I see the pollution of our money, like the debasement of our money, is like the debasement of our psychology, the debasement of our culture. So I think we're going to go through this whole painful stage of like realizing how much bullshit we actually live in before we start to hopefully hit a rock bottom and rebuild a society that's premised more on volition, like mutual voluntary exchange, rather than coercion.